Oh, nice peaceful day out here, folks. The birds are chirping. I don't know if you can hear it. Great peaceful day for a car video. We've been going over recently in recent car vids uh, something we often touch upon because it's really the main bit of advice I like to share when it comes to feeling better quickly, and in turn seeing that not only make you feel better but sometimes affect your outer reality rather quickly or gradually, but regardless affect your outer reality. And this bit of advice is basically, instead of trying to limit yourself and do some certain kind of technique to quote unquote manifest something, you stop putting limitations on yourself. You stop limiting your self-concept by getting yourself out of there. And this is something that sounds impossible to do or very hard to do, and is often made very esoteric when you read these various manifesting and metaphysical teachers and religious teachers talking about, cutting off the ego or getting rid of self. But I don't really think on a practical, pragmatic level, it's as difficult as we often hear. And it does not necessarily have anything to do with manifesting anything. The observation I've made is that when you do this, when you get yourself out of the way more, and I'm going to talk to you in a minute about how to do it, and if you're familiar with this channel, you already know all this. When you get yourself out of the way, it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with like manifesting a specific thing or changing your life. But if you do it more, if you recognize more that you are not actually the limited you, but there is something more there that's actually good and naturally abundant. And if you relax into it, if you relax into this abundance, your outer reality just does change and shift and, generally speaking, get better. But that's secondary, at least usually for me, because for me, when I try too hard to do a manifesting technique or perform a manifesting technique consistently, it usually either bores me, or I just, I feel like it's not working when I think about it rationally, or I just notice it doesn't have much of an effect, even if I do it for like a few months. While if I loosely do some of these techniques and apply them just very gently, generally speaking, but focus on transcending my normal self, transcending those normal limitations, I just feel better and more relaxed, and things come into my life more easily. So how do you do it? Well, you do it in the way that we always talk about. And if you want more of a rundown, just check out my book, The Joy of Not Thinking. The Joy of Not Thinking, I'll put a link below to that. It goes over various ways of doing that. But there's so many videos, including my Stop Being Serious video series, where we go over ways to just cut off that normal limited self, and notice that you are not your normal limited self, but you are right now, this moment, free. So easy ways to do it are to move around a lot. Move your body around a lot. Be very playful. Go. Do that for like a minute or two. Get really into it 100%. And you'll notice what's going on, what you're thinking you are, your normal self-conception, your normal self-concept's not real. There's something underneath. Likewise, we can do things like speaking out loud to ourselves, or becoming very still, meditative, like we often go over in my podcast, very present. All these different ways, and again, I talk about them in The Joy of Not Thinking and elsewhere, are ways to realize that you are not your limited self. You are not, what you label yourself as being is not what you actually are. And every time we recognize this, we become present, and we recognize inherently we're okay. Right now, we're already okay. We might not feel good. Our external reality might not be to our liking whatsoever. We might still have, even though we recognize this, we might notice our head still racing with very anxious thoughts. All this stuff, all this bad shit can be happening, right? But nonetheless, there is this piece there that is beyond our labels of what's going on, that's just there. You are already fine. You are already good. You could say you are already perfect. If you want to use spiritual language, you could say you are already God in that sense. You're free already, but you don't recognize it. I'm free already, but I don't recognize it. That is, that's life, man. In most, spiritual, mystical type, non-dual teachings, point at this. Now, how do we connect it with manifesting? Turning our external reality more to our liking is very, well, first of all, it's very gray. From what I've seen, it's not nearly as precise a science as a lot of these manifesting and metaphysical teachers make it seem like. But a commonality is when you recognize that you are not you and you are not limited in the way you think, there's a peace there. And there's also, like I said, a natural kind of like abundant, life-giving force. And if you tap into that more, if you recognize that more, your life tends to get better. Again, we've been speaking about this a lot in recent videos. So I thought I would bring in one of the teachers that's helped me the most recognize this correlation between just recognizing the peace that we are, which really has nothing to do with anything in terms of manifesting anything or anything. It's just recognizing now. Recognizing that, correlating that with manifesting better things in our life. And that person, that teacher, is Richard Dotz, who we often have spoken about and who you will not see spoken about much on social media. Which, kind of like Emile Coué, is totally crazy in my opinion. Because Richard Dotz is certainly one of the best manifesting teachers I've ever, read. His advice. He's only a writer. He's not like a speaker or anything like that. I think his name is not even his real name. But he's a genius. And he's written so many good books. We've talked about this before. I'll put a link above to me talking about some of Richard Dott's books. I'm going to read today just an excerpt, which is going to kind of link together what we just spoke about like just realizing you're already okay, cleaning the slate in that way. And then once you realize that you're already okay, recognize that. And that's a very simple thing to recognize in the sense that, like, stop thinking right now. You're okay. As soon as you stop thinking so rationally, you're present and you're okay. Once you do that, you then realize it becomes easier to kind of work with that to change your external reality. And Richard Dotz explains this better than anybody I've just about ever read. This book is Spontaneous Manifestations from Zero. It's Richard's written a ton of books. They're all... I recommend that he wrote some books recently, the last couple of years. I recommend the older ones, the ones written between like 2014 and 2017. I like those ones better. But all of them have fantastic advice in them. Here's just this isn't like a exceptional paragraph or passage. This is just how Richard always writes. He's that good. He's always fantastic. So, again, keep in mind what we just said about becoming present for at least a moment, dropping the limitations, the blinders of thought, of overthinking. Realizing that you're here right now, that you are fine right now, that you are good right now, that you are God right now, if you want to use more spiritual language. Consider that, and then, listen to this in that context. Dotz writes, the difference between an effective manifester and a struggling manifester lies in your choice of focus. In other words, where you choose to place your thought energy and what you choose to pay attention to makes all the difference to your outer results. Effective manifestors are able to place their mental focus singularly on their desired outcomes. even in the face of contrary physical evidence or unpleasant physical symptoms. While struggling manifestors are constantly swayed by physical evidence and by how things currently are in the real world. They are constantly being taken in by the evidence presented by their five senses, not realizing that this quote-unquote reality is malleable and can be changed at any time. Struggling manifestors do not realize that the moment they withdraw their physical focus and place no or less attention on their undesired realities, that the undesired realities start to fade away by themselves without their physical intervention. This is perhaps the most difficult principle to grasp in the whole of these manifestation teachings. The act of turning our focus away from the current reality has been mislabeled by our society as being impractical, lazy, or running away from reality. But, as Abraham-Hicks puts it, you should never face reality unless it pleases you. In the beginning, my reality did not really please me. There were many elements of the world I was living in that upset me, that I fervently wanted to change. However, I did not understand that I had a hand in creating all of them, even those elements that I did not like. By allowing myself to dwell on these unpleasant aspects of my reality, I was in fact perpetuating my unwanted reality even more. The second phase of my transformation occurred when I took Abraham-Hicks' advice to heart. Recall in the previous chapter that for years Abraham-Hicks had been talking about the importance of, quote-unquote, telling a new story. Well, what I was doing all along was telling the old, worn-out story over and over again while secretly wishing that things could be somewhat different. Of course they cannot change. Universal laws always give you more of what you choose to place your conscious focus on. But one day, after applying an early version of the magic transformation process, I decided to try telling a new story just for once, and I never looked back. So that's just an excerpt from Spontaneous Manifestations from Zero. Great book. Like most of Richard's books, just phenomenal. Emphasizing just where do we put our focus? Where do we put our focus? And that's a constant choice. Where do we put our focus? But if instead of trying to improve things by focusing hard, if we just clean the slate by becoming present and recognize we're okay right now, you're going to notice your focus naturally improves because there's an inherent sense of goodness, of godness, of abundance right now. So simply by focusing more of the time, recognizing what you already really are when you just, cut off your judgments, your limiting thinking, and just realize what you actually are right now. By doing that more, your life naturally improves. And then if you want to focus on specific things gently to improve your life more, it's more easy to do that. Dots always talks about light touch manifestations, taking a very light touch. And, getting to this quote unquote neutral place, cutting off all that stuff that bothers you to do that. We can always come back to right now. And this is the kind of stuff that we just don't hear spoken about, in my opinion, intelligently a lot, in social media or in general when it comes to the law of attraction or the law of assumption or whatever the heck you want to call it. The stuff Dots is talking about is brilliant. Dots should be considerably more discussed than he is, in the same way that Kuei should be discussed much more than he is. But this process is one where we have to work with it gently and just do what works best for us to get to that place where we feel okay more of the time. If we can do that, recognize that we're already okay, that we're already abundant, more and more we'll feel better. At least in my experiences. So yeah, I hope this was helpful. If you would like help, I'm here for coaching. I'm here to answer your questions. If you're new to this channel, just so you know, I don't respond to comments on YouTube. But I will do something better than that. If you have a genuine question for me, I will I'll speak to you on Zoom or the phone or email with you if you've never spoken to me before to try to help you out and to see if I can be a help discussing and working with you on this process. I can be reached at radicalcounselor.com. Until next time, be here.